Hello friends, now we are going to start with a Z transform. Let us begin. To learn Z transform is having a motivation same as that we have started learning a Laplace transformation. So first of all, we will recollect why we used to do a Laplace transformation or what was the motivation behind learning or behind starting Laplace transformation. Reason behind starting with Laplace transformation, because there were some limitations of Fourier transform. Fourier transform wasn't applicable to those signals which were unbounded in nature. Since Fourier transform wasn't applicable to those signals which are unbounded in nature, we go for Laplace transformation. So solution over 8, Laplace transform. On a contrary side, we have the another transformation called as discrete time Fourier transform. So when do we use a normal Fourier transform? In fact, the Fourier transform that we have learned was a continuous time Fourier transform. Continuous time Fourier transform is used to analyze the signal which are continuous in nature. That is, suppose if you have signal x of t which is continuous in nature, and suppose you want to decompose it into frequency domain, then we go for a continuous time Fourier transform. But if the given signal is discrete in nature, that is not x of t but x of n, and let's say if you want to transform it into frequency domain, then we use the another tool for Fourier transform, that is discrete time Fourier transform. So likewise, a continuous time Fourier transform wasn't applicable to those signals, that is x of t, which were unbounded in nature. We use a Laplace transform. Similarly, discrete time Fourier transform is applicable to only those discrete time signals which are bounded in nature. So please understand, continuous time Fourier transform is used to transform signals x of t which are continuous in nature into frequency domain called as x of omega. But sometimes your x of t signal may be unbounded in nature, then a Fourier transform wasn't applicable, then we go for a Laplace transform. Then we have alternative for a continuous time Fourier transform as Laplace transform. We have x of s. Similarly, when you go for DTFT, you go for DTFT when you want to transform your signal to frequency domain, but this time your signal is not continuous in nature, it is discrete in nature. So the signal that you have is not x of t but x of n. Then we go for DTFT, that is discrete time Fourier transform. So this time I'm going to have discrete time Fourier transform, after which signal becomes x of e to the power j omega. Why signal becomes x of e to the power j omega? I'll explain you this. But right now, just concentrate that I'm not going for continuous time Fourier transform. I'm going for discrete time Fourier transform only because of the reason x of n is discrete in nature. So we have another tool, that is DTFT. Now, the limitations that CTFT has, that is continuous time Fourier transform, has, the same limitation even DTFT has. That is, the given signal x of n has to be bounded in nature, only then we can go for discrete time Fourier transform. So those signals which are discrete in nature, that is x of n, that is discrete in nature, but they are unbounded in nature, then I go for Z transform. Then the remedy is to go for Z transform. So there are some limitations of DTFT. To overcome those limitations, we go for Z transform. So x of n after Z transformation becomes x of z. So let me summarize what we have done so far. If you have signal x of t which is continuous time and bounded, we go for continuous time Fourier transform. After transforming, it becomes x of omega. Then let's say you have continuous time signal, but it is unbounded in nature. Then we know that continuous time Fourier transform is not possible. Then we go for another tool called as Laplace transform. So those signals which are continuous as well as unbounded in nature, we go for Laplace transform. Am I right? The same story is applicable over here, that is in case of discrete time signal. So here x of n is actually a discrete time signal but bounded in nature. We will go for DTFT tool, that is discrete time Fourier transform. Likewise, in continuous time Fourier transform, after transformation signal becomes x of omega. Here in discrete time it becomes x of e to the power j omega. As I said, and I have promised you how it becomes x of e to the power j omega, I'll explain to you. Similarly, when your signal is discrete in time but unbounded in nature, then we know that DTFT fails. So we go for another tool called as Z transformation, which is the chapter now we are going to start with, is what we called as x of z after transformation. So I'm sure you got what is the motivation for Z transform. And of course, to start with Z transform, we should know what are the limitations of discrete time Fourier transform. But again, to know the limitations of discrete time Fourier transform, you should also know how to take a discrete time Fourier transform. Of course, we have not started yet with discrete time Fourier transform, but yes, the chapter which is after this would be a discrete time Fourier transform only. But to begin with Z transform, we should know little bit about discrete time Fourier transform. So I'll show you some glimpse about discrete time Fourier transform. We will understand the limitations very clearly. We will understand what is the remedy over it and how we switch to Z transform. So in first case, signal is continuous time. In second case, signal is discrete time. When the signal was continuous in time as well as bounded, that is x of t, and if I want to decompose into a frequency, then we go for a tool called as continuous time Fourier transform, and you know very well it becomes x of omega. Similarly, if the signal is discrete time in nature and of course it is bounded, represented as x of n, then we go for discrete time Fourier transform, and after that it becomes x of e to the power j omega. We know the formula of x of omega. It is integrating over minus infinity to infinity x of t e to the power minus j omega t dt. Whereas when it comes to discrete time Fourier transform, we will see the formula for this. When we are talking about continuous time, as you have seen in the formula, there is an integration. But you know that there is absolutely no space for integration when it comes to discrete time. Integration in continuous time becomes summation in discrete time. So analogous operation in discrete time for integration is summation. Here we are going to vary our signal x of n. We are going to vary n from minus infinity to infinity. Instead of x of t, we have x of n multiplied by e to the power minus j omega. Now instead of t, we know the independent variable is n over here. So this is the formula in order to get discrete time Fourier transform. So you know very well, after solving this integration, listen to me very carefully. After solving this integration, you will get something which is in terms of omega. So after solving this, you get some terms which are in terms of omega, or some mathematical expression in terms of omega, and therefore it is called as x of omega. I hope the thing is clear. Similarly, after solving this summation, that is nothing but a formula for discrete time Fourier transform, you will get something in terms of e to the power j omega. And since you get some mathematical expression in terms of e to the power j omega, finally it is called as function of e to the power j omega, and therefore we have written x of e to the power j omega, and that's the reason why we write discrete time Fourier transform form, and hence we write after discrete time Fourier transform of x of n as capital X of e to the power j omega. Also, we know what are the limitations for continuous time Fourier transform, that it is applicable only for bounded signal. Similarly, discrete time Fourier transform is applicable only for discrete x of n signals. So we know very well it fails. That is, continuous time Fourier transform fails for unbounded signal. Same point is applicable in discrete time Fourier transform. So what was the remedy? Since you have unbounded function, but still if you want to transform those signal into frequency domain, the remedy is to multiply the given function with e to the power minus sigma t, and that is what we called as a convergent factor, also called as damping factor. So what you do is you multiply your signal x of t by e to the power minus sigma t, and this is what we called as a convergent factor or damping factor. And after that you take a Fourier transform of this. So the remedy was, since x of t signal is unbounded in nature, we know that Fourier transform for x of t does not exist. So instead of taking Fourier transform of alone x of t, you take Fourier transform of x of t multiplied by e to the power minus sigma t, and e to the power minus sigma t is called as a damping factor or a convergent factor, and therefore we get x of t e to the power minus sigma t e to the power minus j omega t dt, integrating over minus infinity to infinity, and you know rest of the story. This is what we called as a Laplace transform x of s. Similar story happens on discrete time also. That is, we know that let if x of n is unbounded signal, then we know that discrete time Fourier transform for x of n is not possible. So what we do is we multiply our x of n with a conversion factor as r to the power minus n, and then we take a discrete time Fourier transform for this. So let us take discrete time Fourier transform for x of n multiplied by r to the power minus n. So we know the formula. It is summation n equal to minus infinity to infinity. Now our signal is not just x of n. See, originally signal was just x of n. Now signal is x of n multiplied by r to the power minus n. So I'll write it over here, x of n r to the power minus n multiplied by, according to the formula, it is e to the power minus j omega n. So it is actually discrete time Fourier transform of x of n multiplied by r to the power minus n is now equal to summation n is changed from minus infinity to infinity, x of n r to the power minus n e to the power minus j omega n. Then these two can be combined together, and I can rewrite this as n is equal to minus infinity to infinity x of n multiplied by r into e to the power j omega whole raised to, I can write minus n. I hope you understood this. So what I have applied over here is law of indices. I have clubbed it together and I can rewrite the expression this way. So please don't forget, this is nothing but your dtft of x of n r to the power minus n. So far we have this expression. Let r into e to the power j omega is a polar constant z. We know that r into e to the power j omega is a polar form. So z is a polar constant here. So now dtft of x of n multiplied by r to the power minus n is now equal to summation n equal to minus infinity to infinity x of n. So instead of this, now I'm going to substitute z. So it is z to the power minus n. And now let me tell you, once you solve this summation, then you will get x, which is function of z. Am I right? And this x of z is what we called as z transform of x of n. So this x of z is nothing but a z transform of x of n. Finally, I can write the relation between DTFT and z transform like this. Discrete time Fourier transform of x of n r to the power minus n is nothing but z transform of x of n, which is nothing but x of z. Let me remind you what we used to do in continuous time Fourier transform. Continuous time Fourier transform of x of t multiplied by e to the power minus sigma t was nothing but Laplace transform of x of t, which is nothing but x of s. So I'm sure now you got the connectivity between continuous time Fourier transform and discrete time Fourier transform, and what was the motivation to start with a z transform. Since I believe that you are comfortable with Laplace transform, then you don't have to really do a hard work to understand z transform. Most of the things that we have learned in Laplace transform, in a similar way, similar fashion, we are going to learn z transform. And you will see most of the things which are similar, because motivation to start with z transform and for starting with Laplace transform was same that we have seen. Irrespective whether the signal is continuous time or discrete time, the thing is, if it is unbounded in nature, how do we make it bounded? Answer is by multiplying with a convergent factor. When it comes to continuous time, the convergent factor was e to the power minus sigma t, and when it comes to discrete time, convergent factor was r to the power minus n. So let's say if I'm talking about continuous time, to make it convergent, we multiplied by e to the power minus sigma t. And what we used to do is, we used to vary values of sigma. Am I right? So we used to vary the values of sigma, and values of sigma for which it becomes convergent, then we say that for those values only Laplace transform does exist. So if you remember, existence condition for Laplace transform. So what was the existence condition? Integrating over minus infinity to infinity mod of x of t e to the power minus sigma t dt should be less than infinity. This was existence condition for Laplace transform. And let me remind you, existence condition for continuous time Fourier transform. So what was the condition? Integrating over minus infinity to infinity mod of x of t dt should be less than infinity. And we know that if x of t happens to be unbounded, then definitely this condition doesn't get satisfied, and then we switch to the another transform, that is Laplace transform. And condition for Laplace transform to exist is integrating over minus infinity to infinity x of t e to the power minus sigma t mod of it dt should be less than infinity. So now we are going to see what happens with discrete time also. We know that in discrete time, let's say if x of n is unbounded, then we multiplied x of n with r to the power minus n, where r to the power minus n is convergent factor. So in continuous time, we used to vary the values of sigma. Here, the values of n are varied. Here, the values of r are varied. Why so? You will understand it. So existence condition for discrete time Fourier transform is, we know that we use summation in case of discrete time. N is varied from minus infinity to infinity. Mod of x of n should be less than infinity. So it clearly states that if you add all the samples of x of n right from n equal to minus infinity to infinity, it should be finite. It should be finite. So it should be absolutely summable for discrete time Fourier transform, and it is possible only if your x of n is bounded in nature. So this condition is satisfied only if x of n is bounded in nature. And you know that every time your signal may not be bounded. If it is unbounded, we go for Z transform. So now we shall see the existence condition for Z transform. It is summation n equal to minus infinity to infinity x of n multiplied with r to the power minus n, and mod of this should be less than infinity. So every time I'm explaining you, I'm every time comparing with continuous time, because you are quite comfortable with continuous time because we have given lot of time to understand continuous time Fourier transform as well as a Laplace transform also. So you are quite comfortable in continuous time as compared to discrete time until and unless we really start with discrete time. So till you become comfortable with this, I'll make sure that I keep on recollecting the concepts from continuous time and I'll somehow try to connect it with discrete time. And once you are comfortable with this, then I'll directly start with the real Z transform. But till then, you have to be quite patient and listen to my concepts very carefully. For example, let's say my x of t is e to the power 3t u of t. We know that this is unbounded function. So graphically it looks like this. When t equal to 0, e to the power 0 will become 1, and when t tends to infinity, it will become e to the power infinity. In fact, this is a positive exponential curve. And since u of t is multiplied, then you don't have to draw a left hand side. So this is unbounded signal. Since it is unbounded signal, I cannot decompose it into frequency by using continuous time Fourier transform. So what we do is we used to multiply our x of t with e to the power minus sigma t. So to make it bounded, we multiplied with e to the power minus sigma t. So function becomes like this: e to the power 3t multiplied by e to the power minus sigma t. Am I right? Or this is equal to e to the power 3 minus sigma t. Is that right? So here our task is to vary the values of sigma. Am I right? Let us assume sigma equal to 0. So please understand, in this expression you have to vary the values of sigma. Let us assume sigma equal to 0. If sigma equal to 0, what will happen? It will remain e to the power 3t. So you know that e to the power 3t, it's something which looks like this. This is for sigma equal to 0. For sigma equal to 1, what will happen? It will become e to the power 2t. So when sigma value is equal to 1, it will become e to the power 2t. So this is e to the power 3t. After sigma equal to 1, it will become e to the power 2t. Then for sigma equal to 2, it will become e to the power t. But still, it is unbounded in nature. You know that at sigma equal to 3, it will become a constant function. This is for sigma equal to 3. For sigma equal to 4, imagine if sigma is equal to 4, 3 minus 4, it is minus t. Since it is e to the power minus t, it will become a negative exponential now. This is for sigma equal to 4. Then sigma equal to 5. Then sigma equal to 6. Sigma equal to 7, and so on. So if you see carefully, sigma greater than 3 region is the region where signal becomes bounded, and once signal become bounded, then we can very well take a continuous time Fourier transform of the same. So continuous time Fourier transform of x of t multiplied by e to the power minus sigma t is applicable only when sigma greater than 3, and we know that continuous time Fourier transform of x of t e to the power minus sigma t is what we called as Laplace transform of x of t, and sigma greater than 3 it's said to be ROC, that is region of convergence. So I'm sure you know this is what I'm talking about, the same that I have already talked or already taught in the last lecture. Am I right? Now let me go to the discrete domain and let me discuss in the same context. So in continuous time, since we have taken the example of unbounded signal, here also I'm going to take an unbounded signal only. So x of n, assume that it is 3 to the power n times u of n. So e to the power 3t u of t is what we called as exponential signal. Similarly, I have taken exponential signal in case of discrete time. So remember, exponential signal in terms of continuous time we take like this, e to the power at, e to the power minus at, and so on. But in case of discrete time, we take exponential functions like this, 2 raised to n into u of n, 5 raised to minus n into u of minus n, like this. So this is how we take exponential signal in discrete time. So let me try to plot 3 to the power n u of n. Don't forget, this time it is a discrete signal, and we calculate the values of x of n only at n equal to integer, that is n equal to 0, n equal to 1, n equal to 2, and so on. So tell me, what if you substitute n equal to 0? So once you substitute n equal to 0, it will become 3 to the power 0, and anything raised to 0 is 1. So at n equal to 0, you will get 1. At n equal to 1, it will become 3. At n equal to 2, it will become 3 square, which is 9. So in a way, with increase in values of n, it will become like this. So if you see, this is quite unbounded in nature, am I right? This is unbounded in nature. This is unbounded in nature. So what I'm actually trying to convey you, the way e to the power 3t u of t was unbounded, similar way 3 to the power n u of n is also unbounded in nature. So what is the remedy? To make x of n to be bounded, we multiplied by conversion factor, like we multiplied over here by e to the power minus sigma t. So here I'm going to multiply my x of n with r to the power minus n. So what is your x of n? Your x of n is 3 to the power n dot u of n, which is multiplied with r to the power minus n. So what I'm actually doing, I'm going to club this together. So it will become 3 by r to the power n u of n. Is that right? Now what I'm going to do, here I'm going to vary the values of r, and I'm going to plot the functions for different values of r, and I'll see to it for which r value it is going to become bounded. So what we have over here is n on x-axis. So let us assume r value equal to 1. So when r value equal to 1, what will happen? It will remain 3 raised to n u of n. So when r value is equal to 1, it will remain 3 raised to n u of n only. Am I right? And for 3 raised to n u of n, we already have the response. So I'll copy the above response only, which is unbounded in nature. So as you can see, I'll still get this kind of graph for r equal to 1. Let us assume r equal to 2. So for r equal to 2 also, you will get similar growing graph. For r equal to 3, now you can imagine if r equal to 3, this 3 will get cancelled. It will be 1 raised to n u of n, then you will get a constant graph. So for r equal to 3, you'll get constant graph. Now for r equal to 4, you'll get a decaying one. Then for r equal to 5 also, you'll get decaying one. Of course, for r equal to 6, r equal to 7, you'll start getting decaying graph. And we know that the graphs which are decaying in nature are considered to be bounded in nature, and those which are bounded in nature, we can easily go for discrete time Fourier transform of the same. So what I can conclude over here is, when r is more than 3, we can take what? Discrete time Fourier transform of x of n r to the power minus n. And you know that discrete time Fourier transform of x of n multiplied by r to the power minus n is nothing but x of z. Am I right? Therefore, r greater than 3 is considered to be ROC. Like we had sigma greater than 3, as ROC for Laplace transform x of s in discrete time r greater than 3 can be considered as ROC for x of z. So if you remember, the value of z was r into e to the power j omega. I hope you remember this. So if you see carefully, it is in polar form, because something which is written like this, then this r is a magnitude and phi is what we call as phase or angle. Similarly, here r is what? It is nothing but a magnitude. And what is omega over here? Omega over here is what we call as a phase angle. Am I right? Then for x of n signal, which was 3 power n u of n, we have seen the ROC for this is r greater than 3. But tell me, what is meant by r? R is nothing but magnitude of z. Am I right? So r can be written as mod of z, which is greater than 3, which is nothing but region of convergence. Once again, look at this. Z is in which form? It is in polar form. This Z is in which form? It is in polar form. If it is in polar form, this R becomes what? It becomes magnitude of what? Of Z. Therefore, when I'm saying that ROC is represented as R greater than 3, I can represent my R as mod of Z greater than 3. That's the reason why when you have learned your Z transform in your university days, you must have seen they used to show ROCs like this. This is mod Z greater than 3 and so on. Am I right? So let me just go back to Laplace transform once again. In Laplace transform, we used to have S-plane. So I have defined S-plane as a 4-quadrant system having positive real axis, negative real axis, positive imaginary axis, and the negative imaginary axis. Am I right? And in this S-plane, we used to show the ROC area. So this is what we called as S-plane. So S-plane is required to show the location of poles along with the location of ROC, a region of convergence where my x of s does exist. Similarly, when it comes to Z transformation, we have Z plane to show ROCs. So now we are going to have Z plane. So you'll see a similar structure of Z plane, and to show ROCs, we have circles in Z plane like this. We can have circles of various radius here. For example, if I'm having a particular point here, fine, then distance from the origin to this point is considered as r. And with respect to this point, we are having some angle with respect to this x-axis. This is what we called as omega. In turn, in polar form, I can write this point as r into e to the power j omega. I hope you can see this. So r is nothing but radius of this circle. Am I right? R is nothing but radius of this circle, and omega is nothing but an angle with respect to that point. So when the omega is varied from 0 to 2 pi, then you get a complete circle. In a way, you get circles in case of Z plane. Now we are going to see the ROC relationship between Laplace transform and Z transform. So first of all, this is S plane and this is Z plane. If you know, we have origins here. This is positive sigma, negative sigma. Therefore, I can consider this area for sigma greater than 0, this area for sigma less than 0. Am I right? Now, let us try to have some mapping between S plane and Z plane. So I'll show you how to map them. See, if you remember, you had function f of t which was unbounded in nature to make it bounded, you multiplied with conversion factor e to the power minus sigma t. Similarly, in case of discrete time, you had signal called as f of n, which was unbounded in nature. To make it bounded, you multiplied with r to the power minus n. I hope you got my point. Now what I'm actually doing is, see, in continuous time we have f of t, in discrete time we have f of n. Similarly, we have t as independent variable in case of continuous time and n as independent variable in case of discrete time. What does that mean? The remaining thing I can now compare, or I can have some correlation between this. So what is only remaining, I'll write it. So now I can write e to the power minus sigma is equal to r to the power minus 1, or I can just write r is equal to e to the power sigma. Now see carefully what I'm actually trying to do. This is not equal relation. This is just a correlation between r and sigma. Now see carefully. See, in j omega axis, or with respect to j omega axis, can I say sigma value equal to 0? Tell me. If you substitute sigma equal to 0 in this case, can I say r will become equal to 1? Because r will be equal to e to the power 0, and e to the power 0 is what? 1. And what is meant by r? You know that r is nothing but radius of the circle. So r stands for radius of the circle, also considered as mod of z. So whenever sigma equal to 0, then r is equal to what? E to the power 0, which is 1. So I can draw a circle which is nothing but a unity circle. So this is a unit circle now. Am I right? What does that mean? It means sigma equal to 0 will have the same significance as unit circle in z plane. So as we have discussed, the significance that sigma equal to 0 has, the same significance will have mod of z equal to 1. So this is a unit circle. So sigma equal to 0 in which plane? S plane, refers to unit circle in z plane. I hope you got this point. See, this is happening because we have compared our f of t with f of n. We have compared our t with n. Then what is remaining? E to the power minus sigma equal to r to the power minus 1. Or I can say r is equal to e to the power sigma. In that case, what I did is I substituted sigma equal to 0 here. Then r has become 1. You know that what is r? R means radius of the circle, which is also considered as mod of z. What does that mean? In S plane, if I'm talking about sigma equal to 0, and the significance that sigma equal to 0 has, the same significance it will carry in Z plane for unit circle. So I'm just trying to prepare a small chart here. This is what we called as S plane to Z plane mapping. So next I'm going to talk about sigma greater than 0 area. You know that sigma greater than 0 area, so I'm going to talk about this area, which is also called as right half of S plane. Am I right? So for coherence purpose, we have stated that r is e to the power sigma. So whenever I say sigma greater than 0, I'm talking about the sigma. If it is greater than 0, can I say that? Then it will be r greater than 1. What is meant by r? R is nothing but mod of z. See, whenever I say mod of z greater than 1, it means I'm talking about the area which is outside the unit circle. So sigma greater than 0 is what we called as right half of S plane gets mapped to the area which is outside the unit circle. So I can draw this area which is nothing but outside the unit circle, which is nothing but a mapping of right half of S plane. So the significance that right half of S plane carries in S plane, the same significance it will carry the area which is outside the unit circle when it comes to Z plane. Let's talk about the remaining area, which is sigma less than 0. So let me talk about the area which is present at sigma less than 0. So sigma less than 0 is the area. It is also called as left half of S-plane. This is called as left half of S-plane. So you see we have this relation where r is e to the power sigma. If sigma happens to be less than 0, then it will be negative, and in that case r will result less than 1. So when sigma is less than 0, you know that sigma less than 0 means it refers to left half of S-plane, then r will be smaller than 1, and you know that what is meant by r, it is nothing but mod of z, which is less than 1, and r is radius of the circle. So when I am saying mod of z less than 1, it means I'm talking about the area which is inside the unit circle. Therefore, the left half of S-plane that you see will get mapped over here, that is inside the unit circle. So the whole left half gets mapped inside the unit circle. The right half of S-plane gets mapped as area which is outside the unit circle, and sigma equal to 0 gets mapped as if it is a periphery of a unit circle. So I hope you understood what is the relationship between Laplace transform and Z transform in context to ROC, area. Because when I'm talking about ROC, in case of Laplace transform, we always talk in terms of sigma, and when it comes to Z plane, we always talk in terms of mod of Z. So for a conclusion purpose, I'll write sigma equal to 0, which is in S plane, also called as j omega axis. In Z plane, it becomes unit circle. Unit circle means r equal to 1, and you know that r is also called as mod of z, which is equal to 1. This is the first conclusion that we have drawn with the discussion. Secondly, we have considered sigma greater than 0. Sigma greater than 0 means this is what we called as right half of S-plane. In Z-plane, it got mapped as area which is outside unit circle. Which is expressed like this, that is r greater than 1, or I can write mod of z greater than 1. And finally, we need to talk about sigma less than 0. Sigma less than 0 means it is left half of S-plane. As you have seen, in Z-plane, it got mapped as area inside unit circle, that is r less than 1. So left hand side indicates it is S-plane, and right hand side indicates it is a Z-plane. So now we have learned the mapping between S-plane and Z-plane. So the significance that sigma equal to 0 carries in S-plane, the same significance will carried by unit circle. The significance that carries sigma greater than 0 in S-plane, the same significance will carry the area which is outside the unit circle, and at the last, sigma less than 0 area, that is left half of the S-plane. So whatever significance that left half of S-plane has in Laplace transform or S-plane, the same significance will carry area inside the unit circle in case of Z transform. Thank you.